Last month, China and the United States celebrated what was the 50th anniversary of the famous Richard Nixon visit to China. It's a visit that changed the course of US-China ties and indeed that of history. What is seldom talked about is the reason why Nixon made that trip was also to drive a wedge between China and the then Soviet Union. And by doing that, the United States was able to ensure that Communist China and Communist Soviet Union did not form a bloc. Nixon's visit marked an entente in China-US ties, but it also marked a Sino-Soviet split. Cut to 2022, 50 years later, it was the Russian and Chinese presidents at the inauguration of the Beijing Winter Olympics a few weeks ago, holding hands and proclaiming to the world their limitless friendship. A few weeks later, Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine. On Crux Decode this week, what lessons is Xi Jinping drawing from Putin's invasion? Will Xi be emboldened to take military action against Taiwan, inspired by his friend Putin? Since Putin's invasion, Beijing's public statements have been as ambiguous as ever, expressing respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity on the one hand, but at the same time, they've gone out of their way to emphasize Russia's security concerns and refrained from calling Putin's military action an invasion. In fact, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson was asked 11 times on the day of the Ukraine invasion whether she condemns it and whether this is an invasion of Ukraine's sovereignty. And guess what? She refused to answer 11 times. China and Russia have one common enemy, the United States, and one common need to jointly confront America. And that is making both of them to choose a strategic alliance. Just before the Winter Olympics, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin signed as many as 15 cooperation agreements. They even proclaimed their partnership as one that has no limits. And now, the New York Times is reporting that it was Xi Jinping who insisted to Putin that he should only invade Ukraine after the Olympics are over. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. Vladimir Putin, on the cusp of a major invasion, decides to postpone his plans because his friend Xi Jinping thinks it would be a loss of face for China. And guess what? Putin obliges. The invasion happens only on the 24th of February, which is much after the games have concluded. And China, in turn, decides to return the favor. On the very day of Russia's invasion, which is the 24th of February, China announced that it would allow wheat imports from Russia. It sends out a signal that Beijing is fully backing Putin, even if it had to balance it out by abstaining in the United Nations. But it's also telling Putin that China has his back. It's going to pick up the tab for economic sanctions which the West has imposed on Russia. China has been Russia's largest trading partner for 12 consecutive years, and Russia is China's largest energy exporter. And now, even more curiously, Russia has reportedly asked China for military equipment to support its invasion of Ukraine. This is a report from the Financial Times, which Beijing has denied, so has Moscow, but US officials insist that this will undermine Western efforts to help Ukraine defend itself. If China does indeed supply Russia with weapons, it'll be the first time ever that China is actively getting involved in a military conflict of another country. While Putin may be portrayed as the main culprit of this unfolding Ukraine crisis, Xi Jinping's role of holding a candle to the devil cannot be ignored. As the military conflict intensifies and economic sanctions against Russia take hold, the big question is this: will Xi Jinping be emboldened to take similar military action against Taiwan? Now, what lessons is Xi Jinping taking away from the invasion of Ukraine? Particularly, the response of the Western countries to Vladimir Putin's actions. If there is a military conflict in the Taiwan Straits, will the United States, for example, adopt the same strategy as it's adopting now in Ukraine? Now, although Taiwan and Ukraine differ very starkly in terms of geopolitical strategy, in terms of geography, history, and of course, most importantly, their role in the international supply chain, the US military restraint in the Russia-Ukraine invasion has undoubtedly come as a big boost to Xi Jinping. If Beijing were to militarily attack Taiwan, while it must consider the economic sanctions, and some of which has been pretty stiff, that major Western countries have imposed on Russia, they will inevitably take the same course on China if China were to invade Taiwan. But here's the catch. China has a stronger economy than Russia, and therefore it may be better placed to withstand the storm of sanctions. But what must be more alarming to Xi Jinping is the economic sanctions that have been imposed by Western countries on Putin and his closest aides, including freezing of all overseas assets by Putin's closest aides and their families. Now, here's the problem for Xi Jinping, because countless Chinese Communist Party officials and their families have transferred millions and millions of dollars worth assets to the United States as well as other Western countries over the last many years. There is no doubt that similar sanctions would be hugely damaging to the Xi Jinping regime. This will affect China's major political families. In fact, since reform and opening up from 1978 onwards, these political elites have been able to accumulate huge fortunes, big portions of which are constantly being transferred overseas. Another critical question that Xi Jinping has to ask himself if he were to take this military action against Taiwan is what will be the attitude of the Chinese people towards the war. Will it be what he wants, or will it be different? Will the people, who will have to no doubt endure a great degree of economic hardship in case there were to be a war between China and Taiwan, will they be willing to take the kind of risks that the government wants them to take? Will those risks threaten the stability of the Chinese Communist Party and its regime? Now, in this particular regard, Xi Jinping may be slightly more confident, maybe even more confident than Vladimir Putin is, because the CCP regime, the Chinese Communist Party regime, has a huge advantage over Russia in terms of monopoly of information, suppression of speech, and of course, deceiving the public. Moreover, Xi Jinping has mobilized the Chinese people's nationalism by advocating what he calls the great rejuvenation of the nation, or the China dream, as he puts it. Now, many netizens in China have openly expressed their support for Russia's invasion. If Xi Jinping were to launch a military conflict in the Taiwan Straits, then this well-controlled public opinion could be a blessing to the legitimacy of such an action. And that is certainly what Xi Jinping wants.